Hello, so in this video I'm going to be talking about one of my favourite films of all time, which is 2013's Filth. This is a film based on the book by Irvine Welsh, which tells the story of a promotion-chasing policeman as his psyche slowly unravels through problems in his personal life. And that makes it something of a role of a lifetime for the lead, which in this instance is James McAvoy, and James McAvoy's performance in this film is incredible. He has some of the early Russell Crowe energy, which makes him at home playing the handsome leading man, but also gives him that edge so he can play more violent or thuggish characters. And you can't really watch Filth without saying something about the supporting cast as well, because they're all really well done. I particularly enjoyed Jim Broadbent. I think his level of mania is just perfect for the role that he's asked to do, but all the supporting policemen are particularly good. But if there's a standout among them, I'd say it's probably Imogen Poots, who is feisty but vulnerable at the same time. It's kind of a role that's disappearing in that it acknowledges the feminine side of the character, the vulnerability of the character, but at the same time is undeniably strong and intelligent. And it's just a shame that there isn't more like that on screen, and she's just so incredible in that role. But quite a lot of what makes Filth so much fun isn't just the role or the performance, but it is also the way that things are shot. So the film starts with this shot of Carol Robertson. Carol Robertson is the wife of McAvoy's character. And I just want to talk about the lighting of the scene, because the lighting of the film is quite interesting throughout. However, I'm not a filmmaker, so there may be some slight errors in the things that I say. Most of what I know about filmmaking, which is not that much, I have learnt through osmosis, through knowing a really talented filmmaker through the last probably 15 years or so. And in filmmaking, when you have a lighting set up, if there's a real genuine light on the screen, it's called a practical. And you can see one at the back there in the reflection in the mirror, and also one to the right of the frame. Now, it's probably not those that are providing the light that you're seeing in this scene. There's probably a bigger lamp off camera to the right that's providing that, and that's just adding to that a little bit. They've been matching the colours. Now, the backlighting is designed to pick the character out from the background and make them have a slight haloing effect. You can see it particularly prominent here on Carol's shoulder. Now, part of the reason that you would do that is that, particularly in this sequence, which we learn as the film goes on, is kind of like a dream or a fantasy sequence, would be to give it that sort of fantasy look, that sort of unreality. And what that's doing here is it's creating the sort of lighting that you'd get in a glamour editorial, which is done for two reasons. Obviously, it's very flattering to the actress, but it also gives it a very subtle, tasteful fantasy look, which is right in this shot for all sorts of reasons. And as the scene goes on, particularly as it ends, there's this extraordinarily powerful backlight behind her. So while her dialogue is foreshadowing the switch in the character towards the end of the film, it is this light that transitions into the next scene where we get, again, a really extraordinary piece of backlighting. So again, you can see the haloing effect that is really picking her out there, even as it's reducing her just to the basics of a silhouette there. And what that means is, because that's so bright, they've had to use this spotlight to pick out the Santa to the right of the scene. But that then really works in that it's sort of distorting him into this sort of not quite human shape. Then we cut into the tunnel, and you can see that the crew here has used a very shallow depth of field. And what that does is that it means that the student here, the Japanese student that's about to be killed by the thugs behind him, and them are swapping in and out of which parts in focus is really quite disorientating and unsettling as the scene goes on. And when it switches to the close-up of this guy, you can see that it's using the same three-point lighting. You've got the backlighting from the practicals, you've got a really powerful light to his right and another light to his left, which is picking out the shadows. But because of the way they're positioned, it is actually, rather than becoming the flattering scene that we've seen with Carol, it's almost distorting his face and making him look, again, like he's quite inhuman. There's a backlight behind him on the steps that they've just come down, and that is kind of faint but also distorted. It was also very faint. If you cut to the other side, you see that again that the backlight there is much more powerful, but mostly it's blocked off by this guy. And I think that is designed to be like the bright light almost of Sanctuary is being blocked off. The other side, the darker side, is the side to avoid. That's where the twisted and inhuman character is. It definitely also helps the young girl here to the side of the frame really stand out. And that's important because she's the one that Robertson will eventually interrogate. And what's interesting there is we see Carol coming down the stairs there, and the powerful, like the extraordinary backlighting is picking her out as a silhouette as she does. But in the frame, in the scene, she actually comes from the other end. Now that would almost be saying that, again, nothing that you see here can be relied upon. It is a pure fantasy. Also, that Robertson is not what she seems. If before she was picked out by that haloing as some sort of angel, we're seeing her coming from the other end, away from the bright lights of heaven, if you like. And what's remarkable about the backlighting in this film is we go through, I'm going to show you all these shots, you can see that every time there's a window is basically so brightly lit through that window that you can see nothing of the background. Now, in part, that might be there to disguise that things are sets, or that perhaps there was something there that they didn't want you to see. You can almost see it as like a narrowing of Bruce, that's James McAvoy's character. His horizons, if you like, are constricted all the time. His perceptions are constricted all the time. He's so focused on one thing that there's this sense of unreality about everything else around him. And you can also see, I think, as that he doesn't very much like his reality, or certainly what he perceives as his reality. He would much rather be the other side of that window. And I say that because the one and only time that you see what is through the window is towards the end, when he throws the bad guy of the piece out of a pane of glass. But if you have this obfuscating light that is the goal, you want to get to the light. When he throws him through the window and reveals what's on the other side, it is pretty dark, it's pretty dingy, and it's certainly no better than where he currently is. The lighting definitely changes in the last few scenes, in which they seem to be more dramatically lit from the front and specifically picking him out, with much less scenes where we have that sort of glow coming from behind him. That's not to say there are none, but there are certainly less. When you do see one, there's actually a further obstacle. In this case, you can see the door. There's another set of windows before you get to the windows with the light. So even though we think that at this point the lighting's change is less soft focus, more harsher and more sort of specific to him, if you're thinking that represents a redemption, you see actually he's further away from the light than he ever was before. One of the final shots of the movie is actually this one. We don't know who's on the other side of this door. It could be Carol with his own daughter, or it could be the woman whose husband he tried to save in the street. But either way, it is a redemption of sorts. And of course, it is snatched away from him. We see them slowly fade out, even as we see the end of his character. It's really, really good. It's kind of faithful. I like the way they've tried to be using the language of cinema as opposed to the language of literature to tell the same sort of story. And it is more simple than the book because certain things are just not filmable. It's equally enjoyable, but in its own way, which I think is the most you can hope for in a film adaptation of a book. McAvoy is extraordinary. Most people do know him as a real talent, but in this I just think it's hard to beat. Thanks for watching. You made it to the end, so the only honourable thing to do now is click like and subscribe.
Sexington University is just your everyday, typical university. Nothing out of the ordinary ever happens here. There's no alien attacks, no homicidal houseplants, no meteor showers, no Cthulhu cults, no fatal field trips, and absolutely no alien professors. Enroll today and get this fabulous free pen.